In the heart of London, where centuries of royal tradition meet modern security protocols, a simple package delivery would expose the deep fractures within the most famous family on Earth. What started as an ordinary Tuesday morning at Buckingham Palace would soon spiral into an international incident, revealing the bitter reality behind closed palace doors. The woman who once walked down the aisle at Windsor Castle as a beloved duchess now found herself treated as a potential security threat. Her own mail intercepted, her access denied, and her dignity stripped away by the very institution she had once called home. This is not just another royal scandal. This is the untold story of how a single package delivery became the final straw that would change everything forever. When the Royal Protection Unit made the unprecedented decision to refuse entry to a former member of the royal family, they unknowingly triggered a chain of events that would expose secrets the palace had desperately tried to keep hidden. The world thought they knew the story of Meghan Markle's departure from royal life, but the truth was far more complex and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. The morning of October 15th, 2024, began like any other for Meghan Markle in her Montecito home. The California sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her study as she reviewed documents for her latest charitable initiative. What she didn't know was that 3,000 miles away, a package bearing her name was causing an unprecedented security alert at Buckingham Palace. The package had arrived through standard Royal Mail channels, addressed specifically to Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, Buckingham Palace, London. The return address showed it came from a children's hospital in Philadelphia, where Meghan had recently made a private visit during her East Coast trip. Inside were handmade cards and drawings from young patients who had been inspired by her story of resilience. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell, head of the Royal Protection Unit's Mail Screening Division, had been examining suspicious packages for over 15 years. She had seen everything from anthrax scares to explosive devices cleverly disguised as innocent gifts. But this package presented a different kind of problem entirely. The address was correct, the contents appeared harmless, but the intended recipient was no longer welcome at the palace. The security protocols were clear when it came to active members of the royal family. Every piece of mail was carefully screened, cataloged, and delivered through proper channels. But Meghan's status remained in a legal gray area that the palace had never properly addressed. Officially, she retained her title as the Duchess of Sussex, but practically, she had been ostracized from all royal functions and communication since her explosive interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2021. Mitchell placed a call to Commander James Wellington, the senior officer responsible for palace security decisions. Wellington had served the royal family for 28 years, starting as a young constable during the tumultuous period following Princess Diana's death. He understood better than anyone how personal drama could quickly escalate into security nightmares. "Sir, we have a situation," Mitchell began, her voice betraying none of the uncertainty she felt. Package addressed to the Duchess of Sussex. Contents appear to be children's artwork, but given the current circumstances, I'm unsure of protocol. Wellington paused, staring out his office window at the palace courtyard where tourists gathered daily, hoping for a glimpse of royal life. The tourists had no idea how complicated that life had become, especially when it came to the California-based duchess who had once been seen as the monarchy's hope for modernization. "What's your assessment of the contents?" Wellington asked. "Harmless children's drawings and get-well cards." The return address checks out as legitimate. Hospital staff confirmed they assisted the children in sending these to the Duchess after her visit last month. "But, sir, we haven't had any communication from our office about expected deliveries." This was precisely the kind of situation that kept Wellington awake at night. Every decision involving Meghan Markle had the potential to become front-page news. The British tabloids were constantly searching for new angles to the ongoing royal rift, and even the smallest security decision could be twisted into evidence of further family drama. The package sat in the screening room while Wellington considered his options. He could authorize its delivery to Meghan's former private secretary, who still maintained an office in London despite her primary residence being in California. He could return it to sender with a standard addressee unknown notation, or he could follow the strictest interpretation of security protocol and treat it as he would any package addressed to someone without current palace access. Meanwhile, back in California, Meghan was unaware of the developing situation. She had spent the morning in meetings with Netflix executives, discussing her upcoming documentary series about women's empowerment. The project had been months in development, and she was passionate about using her platform to highlight stories that might otherwise go untold. Her assistant, Rebecca Chun, knocked on the study door around 11 a.m. local time. "Meghan, I just received a strange call from a journalist at the Telegraph. They're asking about some kind of security incident at Buckingham Palace involving you. Do you know what they might be referring to?" Meghan looked up from her notes, confusion evident on her face. "I haven't had any contact with the palace in months. What kind of security incident?" They wouldn't give details, just said they were seeking comment on a developing story about a package and refused entry. It doesn't make much sense. This was exactly what Meghan had hoped to avoid by maintaining distance from royal affairs. Every interaction with the royal establishment seemed to generate controversy, regardless of her intentions. She had learned through painful experience that even acts of kindness could be twisted into political statements when viewed through the lens of royal protocol. Back at Buckingham Palace, Commander Wellington had made his decision. Following the strictest interpretation of security guidelines, any mail addressed to individuals without current palace access would be handled according to standard exclusion protocols. This meant the package would not be delivered, and the sender would receive a formal notification that the addressee was not available to receive mail at that location. The decision, though technically correct, would have far-reaching consequences that Wellington couldn't have anticipated. The Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, upon receiving the return package notification, would contact local media to express their disappointment. A story about sick children's artwork being rejected by Buckingham Palace was exactly the kind of human interest piece that could quickly gain international attention. Detective Inspector Mitchell executed the protocol with professional efficiency, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this decision would eventually be scrutinized far beyond the palace walls. She had seen how quickly royal stories could spiral out of control, especially when they involved the complicated relationship between the institution and its former members. The return package was processed through standard channels, with a formal letter explaining that the addressee was not currently receiving mail at the specified location. The letter, written in the formal language of royal correspondence, would later be described by media outlets as coldly bureaucratic and deliberately insulting. As news of the incident began to leak through palace sources, the story took on a life of its own. What had started as a routine security decision was being framed as evidence of the royal family's continued hostility toward Meghan. Social media exploded with commentary from both supporters and critics, each side interpreting the events through their own political lens. The timing couldn't have been worse for the royal family, who were already dealing with declining approval ratings and questions about their relevance in modern British society. King Charles, who had been working to repair relationships within the family, found himself once again managing a public relations crisis centered around his daughter-in-law. In California, Meghan watched the story unfold with a mixture of sadness and resignation. She had hoped that maintaining distance from royal affairs would allow the family drama to fade from public attention. Instead, it seemed that even the most innocent interactions with the royal establishment would continue to generate controversy. The package incident highlighted the impossible position that both Meghan and the royal family found themselves in. Every protocol decision was scrutinized for hidden meanings. Every security measure was interpreted as either acceptance or rejection. The normal functions of royal administration had become weaponized in an ongoing public relations battle that served no one's interests. As the first day of the controversy drew to a close, it was clear that this seemingly minor incident would not disappear quietly. The palace press office was fielding dozens of inquiries from international media outlets, each seeking to understand the deeper implications of a rejected package delivery. Meghan's legal team began preparing statements while carefully avoiding any language that might escalate the situation further. They understood that every public comment would be analyzed and potentially used against their client in the ongoing negotiations over her royal titles and security arrangements. The children at the Philadelphia hospital, unaware of the growing controversy, continued their recovery processes with the hope that their artwork had brought some joy to a woman they saw as a symbol of strength and perseverance. Their innocent gesture had inadvertently become the catalyst for yet another chapter in one of the most scrutinized family dramas in modern history. The second day of the crisis began at dawn in London, as Commander Wellington arrived at his office to find 17 missed calls and 43 urgent emails waiting for his attention. The story had exploded overnight across American media, with CNN, NBC, and ABC all leading their morning shows with coverage of what they were calling the Royal Mail scandal. Wellington had anticipated some media attention, but the scale of international coverage caught even his experienced team off guard. The Palace Press Office, led by veteran communications director Lady Margaret Thornbridge, was struggling to craft a response that wouldn't further inflame the situation while maintaining the institution's dignity. "This is unprecedented," Lady Thornbridge told Wellington during their emergency morning briefing. "We've had royal security decisions questioned before, but never over something as seemingly innocent as children's artwork. The optics are absolutely dreadful." The challenge was complicated by the fact that standard palace policy prohibited detailed discussions of security procedures. The very protocols that had guided Wellington's decision were classified, making it impossible for the palace to fully explain their reasoning without compromising operational security. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, Dr. Maria Santos, the chief pediatric oncologist at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, was fielding her own media storm. The soft-spoken doctor had never imagined that helping her young patients send thank you cards would result in international headlines. "These children have been through so much," Dr. Santos explained to a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer. "When the Duchess visited last month, it was like magic for them. She spent hours talking with each child individually, learning their stories, offering encouragement. They wanted to send her something special to show their appreciation." The visit had been arranged privately through Meghan's charitable foundation, with no media coverage or official palace involvement. Meghan had specifically requested that the visit remain low-key, wanting to focus entirely on the children without the distraction of publicity. She had sat bedside with 8-year-old cancer patient Timothy Rodriguez for nearly 30 minutes, listening as he explained his dream of becoming a marine biologist despite his ongoing treatment. It was Timothy's drawing of an octopus, carefully colored in purple and blue, that had been among the returned artwork. His mother, Rosa Rodriguez, broke down in tears when informed that the package had been rejected by Buckingham Palace. "My son thinks he did something wrong," Rosa told reporters gathered outside the hospital. "He keeps asking if his drawing wasn't good enough for the princess. How do I explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense?" The human element of the story was what elevated it beyond typical royal gossip into something far more damaging for the monarchy's public image. This wasn't about privileged adults fighting over protocol and precedent. This was about sick children whose innocent gesture had been caught in the crossfire of institutional dysfunction. Back in Montecito, Meghan was grappling with the impossible position she found herself in once again. Her legal team advised against making any public statements that might be seen as criticizing the royal family or British security services. However, her humanitarian instincts were pulling her toward addressing the children's disappointment directly. Harry, who had been in New York for a sustainability summit, flew back immediately when the story broke. He found Meghan in their home office, surrounded by legal documents and press clippings, trying to navigate a situation that felt increasingly surreal. "This is exactly what we were trying to avoid," Harry said, slumping into the chair across from his wife's desk. "We step away, we maintain distance, we try to live our own lives, and somehow we still end up in the middle of palace drama. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Meghan's original decision to have the children send their artwork to Buckingham Palace had been motivated by her desire to maintain some connection to her former royal role while respecting the boundaries that had been established. She had assumed that children's artwork would be safely above the political fray that had consumed so much of their relationship with the royal family. That afternoon, Meghan made the decision that would define the rest of the crisis. Against the advice of her legal team and public relations advisors, she decided to travel to Philadelphia to personally apologize to the children and collect their artwork directly. "I can't let these kids think their beautiful art wasn't wanted," she told Harry. "Whatever the consequences are for me, with the palace or the press, I can live with those. But I can't live with 8-year-old Timothy thinking his octopus drawing wasn't good enough." The decision to travel to Philadelphia required careful coordination with her security team. While Meghan no longer received official royal protection, the ongoing media attention meant that any public appearance required professional security planning. Her team began making arrangements for what they hoped would be a brief, low-profile visit. However, news of Meghan's planned trip leaked to the press within hours of the arrangements being made. By evening, major news networks were preparing live coverage of what was being billed as Meghan's first public response to the Royal Mail controversy. In London, the palace was scrambling to get ahead of the story. King Charles, who had been briefed on the developing situation during his weekly intelligence meeting, was reportedly deeply concerned about the escalating public relations disaster. The king had been working behind the scenes to heal the family rifts that had dominated headlines for the past several years. His coronation had been overshadowed by questions about Harry and Meghan's absence, and every subsequent royal event was analyzed for signs of reconciliation or further estrangement. Palace insiders, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that Charles had actually been unaware of the package incident until it became a media story. The security decision had been made at the operational level, following established protocols without consultation with senior royals. This revelation added another layer of complexity to the crisis. If the king hadn't authorized the rejection of the children's artwork, it suggested that the royal family was not speaking with one voice on matters related to Meghan and Harry. The apparent lack of communication between different levels of the royal hierarchy was itself becoming a news story. Lady Thornbridge worked frantically to craft a statement that would acknowledge the unfortunate outcome while defending the security service's adherence to protocol. The challenge was explaining why sick children's artwork had been treated as a potential security threat without revealing the specific guidelines that govern such decisions. The statement, when finally released late that evening London time, satisfied no one. It read, "Buckingham Palace regrets that mail addressed to individuals not currently resident at palace facilities was processed according to standard security protocols. The palace values all expressions of support from members of the royal family and appreciates the thoughtful gestures from young well-wishers." Critics immediately pounced on the formal language and bureaucratic tone, arguing that it failed to acknowledge the human impact of the decision. Supporters of the monarchy defended the security services' need to follow established procedures regardless of the contents or senders involved. The divide in public opinion was becoming increasingly stark, with social media conversations about the incident revealing deeper tensions about the monarchy's role in modern society. Younger demographics, in particular, expressed outrage at what they saw as the institution's callous treatment of both children and Meghan. As Meghan prepared for her Philadelphia trip, she was acutely aware that her response to this crisis would be scrutinized as a test of her character and priorities. The easy path would have been to issue a statement through her representatives and let the story fade from the news cycle. Instead, she was choosing to put herself back in the public spotlight to address the disappointment of children she barely knew. The night before her departure, Meghan spent hours writing personal notes to each of the 8 children whose artwork had been rejected. She wanted to ensure that regardless of what happened with the media coverage, each child would understand that their creativity and kindness were valued and appreciated. Her decision to travel to Philadelphia would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately force the royal family to confront the contradictions and limitations of their current approach to the ongoing family crisis. What had started as a routine security decision was evolving into a referendum on the monarchy's values and priorities. Meghan's arrival at Philadelphia International Airport on the third day of the crisis was met with unprecedented media coverage. News helicopters circled overhead while dozens of photographers and reporters waited behind security barriers. What was supposed to be a quiet visit to comfort disappointed children had transformed into a major international news event. The hospital had been preparing for Meghan's visit since the early morning hours. Dr. Santos and her staff had worked to ensure that the children's medical care wouldn't be disrupted by the media attention, while also making sure that the young patients who had sent the artwork would have the opportunity to meet with their unexpected visitor. Timothy Rodriguez, the 8-year-old whose octopus drawing had become a symbol of the controversy, had been asking his nurses every few minutes if the princess was really coming to see him. His mother Rosa had barely slept, torn between excitement about her son meeting Meghan again and anxiety about the media circus surrounding the visit. "I just want my boy to be happy," Rosa told Dr. Santos as they watched the news coverage from the hospital's family lounge. "He's been through so much with his treatment, and when he heard his drawing was sent back, it broke my heart. But now he's so excited that she's coming here just to see him." Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the royal family was dealing with the most serious public relations crisis they had faced in years. King Charles had called an emergency meeting of senior royals and palace staff to address what was being dubbed the children's art crisis in British newspapers. The meeting, held in the king's private study at Clarence House, included Prince William, Queen Camilla, and the heads of various royal departments. The atmosphere was tense as they watched live television coverage of Meghan's arrival in Philadelphia, knowing that every word she spoke would be analyzed for its implications regarding the royal family. "This has gone far beyond what anyone could have anticipated," King Charles told the assembled group. "We need to find a way to resolve this that acknowledges the genuine hurt that's been caused while maintaining the dignity and security of the institution." Prince William, who had maintained a careful public silence about his brother and sister-in-law since their departure from royal duties, was reportedly frustrated by the ongoing drama. Sources close to the Prince of Wales suggested that he felt the family was being held hostage by every administrative decision that involved Harry and Meghan. The challenge for the palace was that any statement or action they took now would be seen as a response to Meghan's Philadelphia visit. They risked appearing either defensive and petty or weak and ineffective in managing their own affairs. At Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Meghan's visit was unfolding in a way that perfectly captured why she had been such a compelling royal figure during her brief time in the family. She moved through the pediatric ward with genuine warmth and attention, spending quality time with each child and their families. When she reached Timothy Rodriguez's room, the 8-year-old was clutching his original octopus drawing, which his mother had saved as a keepsake. Meghan sat beside his bed and listened intently as he explained each detail of his artwork, from the octopus's friendly expression to the underwater castle he had imagined as its home. "You know what, Timothy?" Meghan said, holding up the drawing to admire it in the afternoon light streaming through the hospital window. "This is one of the most beautiful octopi I've ever seen, and I want you to know that your art should never have been sent back. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and this was a big one." The moment was captured by hospital photographers, and the image of Meghan sitting bedside with Timothy, both of them smiling as they looked at his drawing together, would become the defining visual of the entire controversy. As news of Meghan's hospital interactions spread through social media, public opinion was shifting dramatically in her favor. The contrast between her personal attention to individual children and the palace's bureaucratic rejection of their artwork was stark and compelling. Dr. Santos, who had initially been reluctant to allow media coverage of the visit, was amazed by Meghan's ability to focus entirely on the children despite the surrounding circus. She has this remarkable gift for making each child feel like they're the only person in the room, Dr. Santos later told reporters. You can see why these kids were so excited to send her their artwork in the first place. The visit was scheduled to last 2 hours, but Meghan stayed for nearly 4, refusing to leave until she had spent meaningful time with each of the 8 children whose artwork had been returned. She collected new drawings that the children created during her visit, promising to display them prominently in her California home. As the Philadelphia visit was concluding, news broke in London that would fundamentally change the trajectory of the crisis. Palace sources revealed that King Charles had personally intervened to authorize a formal apology to the children and their families. The statement, released just as Meghan was preparing to leave the hospital, read, "His Majesty the King wishes to personally apologize to the young patients at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia whose beautiful artwork was returned due to administrative confusion. The King has been deeply moved by the creativity and kindness of these young artists and regrets that their generous gesture was not received with the appreciation it deserved." The statement went on to announce that the King was inviting the children and their families to visit Buckingham Palace as his personal guests, with all expenses paid by the royal household. It was an unprecedented gesture that caught even senior palace staff by surprise. The timing of the King's statement, coming precisely as Meghan was concluding her hospital visit, was seen by many observers as a carefully calculated move to regain control of the narrative. However, it also represented a significant acknowledgement that the original security decision had been wrong. Commander Wellington, whose strict adherence to protocol had started the entire controversy, submitted his resignation that evening. In his resignation letter, he wrote, "While I believe my decision was technically correct according to established security guidelines, the human cost of that decision has made it clear that our protocols require fundamental review." The resignation sent shockwaves through the Royal Protection Service and signaled that the palace was serious about taking responsibility for the incident. However, it also raised questions about whether Wellington was being made a scapegoat for following the rules he had been given. Meghan's response to the King's statement was carefully measured. Speaking to reporters outside the Philadelphia hospital, she said, "I'm grateful that His Majesty has recognized how special these children are. Their courage in facing serious illness while still thinking of others is truly inspiring. I hope this experience will help ensure that children's voices are always heard and valued." The statement was notable for its diplomatic tone and lack of any criticism of the palace or royal family. Meghan's restraint and victory was seen as evidence of her maturity and continued respect for the institution, despite their differences. The resolution of the crisis marked a turning point in the relationship between the California-based Sussexes and the royal family. While fundamental tensions remained unresolved, the children's art incident had demonstrated that both sides could find common ground when faced with a situation that transcended their personal disagreements. In the weeks that followed, the 8 Philadelphia children and their families made their promised trip to Buckingham Palace. They were received by King Charles personally, and their artwork was displayed in a special exhibition in the palace's public galleries. Timothy Rodriguez's octopus drawing was given pride of place, with a placard explaining the story behind the artwork. The incident also led to a comprehensive review of royal security protocols, particularly those dealing with mail addressed to former or non-resident family members. New guidelines were established to ensure that innocent gestures like children's artwork would be handled with appropriate sensitivity while maintaining necessary security standards. For Meghan, the Philadelphia crisis had demonstrated both the challenges and opportunities of her unique position outside the formal royal structure. She had shown that she could respond to controversy with grace and focus on what truly mattered, while the royal family had proven they could acknowledge mistakes and adapt their approach when necessary. The children at the hospital, who had inadvertently become central figures in a major international incident, returned to their treatment and recovery with a story they would tell for the rest of their lives. They had not only met a real duchess, but had also played a role in changing how one of the world's most famous institutions operated. As the media attention eventually shifted to other stories, the lesson of the children's artwork remained. Sometimes the most innocent gestures can reveal the deepest truths about institutions, families, and the human capacity for both cruelty and compassion. The package that started it all, filled with colorful drawings and hopeful messages, had accomplished far more than its young creators ever could have imagined.